Heather, you teach people a way of out-of-body travel that's called dying daily, or essentially having an NDE every day. What do you mean by dying daily, and why do people choose to do that?
Well, first, it's a joy to see you again. You're you light things up and you lift your guests up, and I really appreciate that. Related to dying daily, I would say that it's kind of like when someone has a near-death experience and they have this profound gift of separating from the physical body and dwelling as their true self soul instead of the little self or the false self. They can kind of get this expanded state of consciousness where they can become aware of things that they weren't aware of before. And so in Dying Daily, I teach how to basically do that without having to get struck by lightning or hit by a car. Like with an NDE, you're practicing leaving your physical body and dwelling as spirit in these different levels of heavenly planes of God. And dying daily means doing that every day. It's like dying every day, going to heaven every day. And it actually kind of reminds me of the way, because I know that some people, they don't have a lot of confidence in themselves spiritually. But what I've seen, what I've seen from experiences, sometimes the individuals have the most humility, meaning they can ask for help, and the most patience. Those are the ones, sometimes they start out thinking, like, I can't do this. I'm not special. I'm not spiritual enough to have an experience like this. And then they discover, they find out that sometimes these are sometimes the people that make the most progress spiritually, because they have the humility to ask for help and to admit that they need to improve, and they have the patience to be patient with themselves and with Divine Spirit, the Varden, and with the teacher, the master. So that's how they make progress with Dying Daily.
So one of the things that when you talk about this, I'm thinking we go through challenges all the time. So we are faced with situations where we're not sure how we're going to make it out on the other side. How can we use such a practice to help us in navigating those challenges when they present themselves?
When you say challenges, what kinds of challenges do you mean? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. So I'm thinking, nowadays a lot of people are depressed, for instance. Um, Economy, I think anywhere in the world you are is probably not doing great. So a lot of people are losing their jobs or not being able to maintain the things that they've had financially. Relationships break up. Um, Things that, yeah, people tend to die, so we lose them. So all of those challenges, when we're faced with them, they bring us to, I think, this hopelessness and
Yeah.
this idea that there's no way we can control it, and almost like we're too insignificant to face it, and that we shouldn't have been, given such a losing hand. So how could we use this practice to help us? And maybe if you have an example of one of your students that we can give to the audience of how we can use this practice to improve the way we're navigating those challenges.
Yes, well, related to that, yeah, I have been working with different students who have encountered that. Firstly, is to realize that everything that happens to us happens for a secret spiritual reason. And when you practice soul projection, it's sort of like giving yourself X-ray spiritual vision, where you can see through a problem and get to the heart and soul of what it is. And so I'll give an example. Once I was faced with karma, past life karma, of having a physical illness. And it's sort of like, what do you do when you have something like, you have almost like, for me, it was like end stage scoliosis and severe back degeneration. And it was agony. It was like I was in so much pain day and night. Like there was never a moment where I was not in agony. It felt like being in surgery without anesthesia. And so the way that I handled this is in soul projection. I could practice spiritual exercises related to healing and understanding. So you're sort of like as soul getting above the problem, and then you can see it at a distance. Some people, they can focus on the Akashic records, which are on the causal plane, a heaven with pure white light and sort of like an orangish. Myself, sometimes I focus on the soul records, which are higher, and I could see that the karmic reason behind my illness was that in a past life, in the Middle Ages, I was a medieval knight, a Christian medieval knight, and I was married. I was married to my husband, who was my husband in this lifetime. But in that lifetime, the lesson I had was I was hurt badly, and I didn't trust in God. I didn't trust in the universe. And that sort of relates to the spine, because the spine is the support of the body. And it manifested as a weak spine, like not feeling supported. And so I had to, when I was able to inwardly see a soul, the reason behind it, I could try to heal it from all levels. So from the spiritual level, I healed it by the causal level, past lives. I healed it by healing my attitude, changing my attitude and my thoughts and my etheric body to instead having an attitude of I am supported by the universe. I do trust God. And practicing that and changing my thought thinking. And then on the physical level, I had to heal by changing my physical diet, by doing certain exercises that strengthen my back. It was like getting inner guidance each step of the way to take. And so sometimes when I've spoken to certain students on the phone or email where they'll encounter like a certain problem, and like recently one student was saying, "Oh, I'm having financial troubles," things like that. And the way we spoke about that was that more or less sometimes divine spirit is trying to get our attention, and when one door closes, another door opens. It could be that, because it happened with me recently too, where I was trying and trying and trying, and nothing was working, no matter how hard I tried. And then, boom, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, divine spirit, the light and sound, this voice of God is trying to show me that this door is closing, that I'm supposed to look over here. And sometimes we're so busy trying to do things an old way that we don't even realize that this voice of God is trying to show us something different, open another door, because we get caught up in this thinking loop, this trap, this sort of like fixed way of seeing reality. And we're moving into a cycle where it's an expansion of consciousness. So you have to sort of adapt to the next state, higher state, which for many people it's like cosmic consciousness. But in Varankar, we sort of aim for self-realization and God realization and spiritual mastership. So it's a huge leap, and because of that, it requires being able to be flexible and flow with spirit. So,
One of the things that you've mentioned was changing your thoughts and changing the way you looked at things. Now, I can imagine when you were dealing with intense back pain, with a disease essentially that was torturing you every second, so a pain that's unbearable, paying attention to your thoughts or even considering shifting them from a place of saying, why is this happening to me? Is there a pill that can fix this immediately? It's an enormous effort. So, how do you go around changing those thoughts and thinking, I might have to try something else, to try thinking something else, in the midst of all that pain.
Yes. Well, sometimes it's a matter of taking a moment to pause in life and go deeper. It's sort of like when you have all of these blessings and gifts right in front of you, but you don't utilize them. You don't utilize them or see them or appreciate them. It's sort of like if we don't appreciate something, then we can't. Then divine spirit can't reach out a hand to help us. And in terms of appreciating things, and in this person's case, part of it was appreciating that the help is already there. We just have to become aware of it. So what happened to him was he ended up having a near-death experience, and the master, Phoebe Kwan's, he's a God-realized master, and I'm the outer teacher, master. And so Phoebe Kwan's appeared to him, and he felt so loved and comforted, and he experienced this enormous love from God. And it was just like it dawned upon him, wait a minute, I'm already blessed. I'm already, the help is right here. I just wasn't seeing it. And, or the tools are right here. I'm just not seeing it. So every day they practice spiritual exercises for 30 minutes a day to leave the physical body, die daily. and a part of that is them being able to utilize that with things in life so that they can handle them better. Spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, on all levels. So yeah, that's a big part of it, is appreciation.
I could not agree with you more. What often people will say, and I'll read that in the comments every now and then, when people feel overwhelmed, they'll say, why would an all-loving God do this to me? Why would they have me go through this, whatever their challenge is? And you've mentioned these challenges being a way for us to understand who God is and to be closer to God and to our true selves. So, how would you answer the question of why would God put me through this if He loves me?
Well, right now, sometimes things that seem like stumbling blocks are stepping stones to something greater than we can imagine. And well, it's in this cycle, for example, is a cycle of spiritual testing. So it means that sometimes we're having some people, including my students, are having all of these karmic tests and challenges bubbling up to the surface like alchemy. In alchemy, the process of alchemy is where you have all the all the crud and junk, it bubbles up to the surface to be worked off so that it's only like pure, pure spirit, like you're purified. This is a cycle of purification, spiritual purification, where all that yuckiness and unlearned lessons and immaturity and lack of spiritual awareness get bubbled up to the surface. And then the person has the opportunity to work that out and to release that. And so, they can work with whomever it is they work with. If they're a new age, they can work with angels. If they're a Vardhanist, they work with the Vardhan masters. And it basically helps them to take a step towards a greater state of consciousness. But it can be really painful and hard when you're going through it, in the middle of it. So a big part of it is being able to be humble enough to ask for help when you need it. Because there are different, whoever the person's spiritual guide is, they can help them to be able to navigate through that and go through those hardships. Because sometimes a hardship is a gift in disguise. It's sometimes something that will bring, like for example, I'll give you an example. My husband used this example, was that say somebody has cancer, it looks evil, it looks negative, like a curse. But then all of a sudden they have this near-death experience, and instead of being trapped in the human consciousness, all of a sudden this whole other reality and universe and heaven opens up to them. and they become closer to God. They discover things that they never knew existed. And so what looked like a curse was a blessing in disguise. So part of that is looking to see, what is it, asking yourself, what is it God or the Vard and Divine Spirit trying to show me through this? And how can I, how do I resolve it, the Varden's way, God's way, Yure's way? So when you approach it from that angle, reality sort of shifts, and you're shown things that maybe you weren't shown before or noticed before.
Mm, absolutely. And in talking with so many people that have had near-death experiences, and they often or all the time come on the back of disease, accidents, not great health circumstances. And what I noticed was that they're always grateful or appreciate what happened because they gained a new understanding. They were able to align their lives with what they're supposed to do. So even though nobody would wish upon themselves an accident or a disease, but those are the moments that are the catalyst for us to change. As opposed to, comfortable life where nothing even remotely challenging ever happens. Why would we want to change that if we had a very comfortable life? There would be
Yes.
no need to.
Yes, actually, that was one of the things related to this past life, was it's like there are different advantages to a golden age and a dark age. And one of the advantages in a dark age is the negative power puts a fire under someone's butt so that they grow up more spiritually. Not always fun though. Yeah. And there's less of that. Sometimes in golden ages, some of the students would get sometimes lackadaisical and not motivated on the spiritual level. And so that's one of the things that is significant.
So you're talking about golden ages and dark ages. Is that for each of us personally? Do we go through different stages, or is it for the world that goes through stages and that brings up our own challenges or fights that we need to go through?
Well, if you look at the course of galactic history, you can see from an overview from the viewpoint of soul, especially if you look at the Akashic records or the soul records, you can see that when someone's incarnating on a planet like Earth, it goes through these cycles or seasons. You have winter, spring, summer, and fall, but then you also have seasons in terms of ages, which are like the Golden Age, like ancient Lemuria, where it was more positive, more light and sound. People were more facing God. Then you have the Silver Age, where it becomes a little negativity is introduced. Then you have the Bronze Age, where people sometimes develop weapons. It's more, it splits into seasons. People have to work in order to survive. And then the Dark Age, or Kali Yuga, which is when it becomes more negative, war, disease, illness, problems, conflicts, things like that. So in these different ages, the longest age is the Golden Age. It lasts well over 1,000,000 years, and the shortest is the Dark Age. But these different cycles are like seasons that souls go through when they're reincarnating on Earth. And some people, way back, they sort of like subtly remember a golden age, so they long to bring it back on Earth. But in my path, we don't focus so much on the seasons, but we focus more on reaching certain states of consciousness, like self and God realization. So that's a part of it. And this past life that I was sharing with you, it was something that occurred during a golden age. So it was very different in a lot of ways to a dark age, like we're going through now. We're sort of in the right now. The ages too have many cycles within them. So right now we're in sort of like the dark age, but we could be entering a golden cycle within the dark age. So
Because that's what I was asking this question because I was wondering, it seems that the world these past few years is just getting we all seem to be getting a bit more at odds with each other, and we cannot seem to be able to tolerate other opinions. And I think when we look at, socially, economically, politically as well, it almost seems like we're more divided than we've ever been, and there's more incentive or encouragement for violence or for power. So for some reason, I tend to think that it's supposed to be resolved at some point, but it almost seems to be getting worse. So that's why I was asking, is it, all this negativity sort of bubbling up so we deal with it and that we finally fight the fight that we're needing to fight and then break free from this cycle of darkness?
Well, related to that, it's a good point. Part of that relates to that this cycle right now, a lot of karma to the surface and other kinds of things. But part of it has to do with that it's an individual thing. Whoops, I'm sorry, one thing here. It's an individual thing where each individual has sort of like a personal responsibility to be responsible for their own state of consciousness. Meaning you can't control. A lot of people have this notion that they want to control outside forces and outside people, or they blame outside forces and outside people for their problems. And when somebody does that, they're giving away their power, that kind of blame. Because a lot of times, I mean, there was one person, I, I have different specialty areas too, on the spiritual specialty areas on the side, and one of them is that individuals that have been like great sinners or negative polarity in past lives, I've sometimes been able to help them significantly as spiritually and on other levels. And there was one individual I was shown inwardly that a lot of people were hating on him, were having horrible low expectations, projecting all this, and everything was going wrong for him. And he didn't understand why. It like there was all this, like he couldn't be successful, he was sabotaging himself. And part of it had to do with that on an unconscious level, he had enormous amount of anger, rage, self-hatred, and guilt for things he was doing. And divine spirit, or this light and sound, was showing me that he kept sabotaging himself. His own self-hatred was reverberating all around him. It was like echoing out all around him. And he thought it was them. Oh, these terrible people that are hating on me, or oh, why these things that are going wrong, it's all their fault. But when he realized to stop blaming them and instead heal that, like heal on the subconscious level, his self-loathing or the hatred, the pain that happened in the past, what ended up happening was all of a sudden he started helping certain people more. Instead of like attacking people, he started helping people. And then all of a sudden, what he gave out suddenly came back to him. It was like a flow of light and sound that just came back to him. And he looked so joyful. He looked so joyful. He was like a negative polarity person. But what it is it's part of it is taking personal self-responsibility. Because one of the big tests in this cycle that both the negative power and God is giving, you have to excuse my voice, I have a little bit of a cold, is that can the person wield power with spiritual maturity instead of like an immature brat or like a helpless child? People in the positive polarity, one of their lessons is learning to stand in their power, or if they don't do that, then they'll flounder and have more problems. And in people in the negative polarity, they have to learn to wield their power with more maturity and love. And so if if the person can't pass that test, then there are negative consequences. But if they can pass those tests, then they can receive more. More will come to them because they show that they're competent to wield the spiritual power, to they're trustworthy to receive it. It's sort of like the negative power is like this giant cosmic filtration system, and it filters out those who are spiritually ready from those who have to go back to kindergarten. And and a part of that right now is like sometimes cycles of testing will do that.
Absolutely. I love your explanation. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about an experience that you've had on a planet with two suns. So, can you share with me a bit more about how you got there and what your experience was like?
Okay. Well, my husband in spirit, Alan G, and I, we had a very deeply spiritual relationship. And one of the things we often sometimes would do different kinds of out of body travel together, but one of the things, and we did this while writing a book. One of the things that we did as sort of like almost a fun little hobby, although it's kind of a weird hobby, is that we would look at past life records. Just for fun, we'd look at past life records we had together in different lifetimes on Earth. We'd see the Middle Ages where we were both knights together, things like that, and then also on other planets. And at one point, just this past life came to both of us at the same time, and we were kind of a little startled by it because it was so different than Earth. It was really different, and it was this very ancient past life, some 100 million years ago, on an ancient alien civilization planet called Ceres. And it was during part of a golden age. It had two suns, very, very high in vibration, 30% less gravity, so you were lighter, much more light and sound. People fed an enormous amount of divine love to the planet, and so it's just everything was like light and glistening. And the people, the Ceres people, they, being that it was a golden age, they had enormous health and longevity. They lived some 6,000 up to 6,000 years. We saw like we saw all, you could say it like this. It's sort of like when somebody looks at ancient aliens from a science perspective, they will look at things like artifacts. But with the soul records, we could see things in great, vivid detail, like everything from the kinds of alien bodies they had, their homes, the kind of recreation, their technology, and especially what we both found interesting was their spirituality and their relationship with God. But on the physical level, they had 48 strands of DNA. They were about 24 feet tall, which is really tall. They had 2 hearts, 4 lungs, could breathe really easily. Everyone on the planet, we had our own flying saucer spacecraft, and really fast. Like you could, in a short amount of time, you could just zip from where you are to the other side of the planet. and there was a lot of serenity, the way the homes were built, and a lot of things about that incarnation. But what I found most intriguing, what we both found most intriguing, was the spirituality, how they dealt with heaven and God, and both my husband and I, we could see like everything that we experienced in that lifetime. I mean, different things that we experienced in that lifetime. He was 800 years old, with youthful brown hair, and that 800 on Ceres would be about 24 Earth years, so a young man. And me, I was older. I was about I think it was like 4,800 years old, which is, like someone in their 60s or, middle age. And I had like snow white hair, and I went by my spiritual name, Gai Shaiza, which means all compassionate one. And I was a teacher of what we call on Sirius the way of the eternal, which today it's the same thing I practice today, which is called Vardankar today. But it was very intriguing. A lot of things that happened. God, there's so many stories I could share as things that happened. But I found it interesting too the way my husband translated a lot of the alien telepathy into human language, and he translated entire lectures, spiritual lectures, which that was intriguing to me, very intriguing to me too.
Wow. But it sounds like quite a place, and I think it must be amazing to be able to tap into these past lives, and also um, I think being exposed to another way of life. Eh,
Yeah, that was actually one of the neat or interesting things about it was it was like we got to step back from our current life and see things from a completely different angle. And I'm that was something that I found very intriguing and interesting. And sometimes it's you see like the same kinds of problems or concerns or blessings, but in a different way. It's kind of weird that way in a different way. And I found that interesting. Like, for example, when my husband in spirit on that life, his name was Dunami. When he was about 400 years old, which is about 11 Earth years old, he he became sort of this God seeker, and he began to. They had this holographic internet, which is sort of like I don't know, like they like the holodeck in Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, where it's like it instead of using a mouse just to move things around, you're moving it with your mind, and then they basically it becomes three-dimensional. So for example, if his dog Iona was in the room, all of a sudden the internet would project into the middle of the room the ocean with a boat like right in the middle of it, and the dog would become frightened like, oh my god, this is, because it would look real. Or it would project into the middle of the room like a giant lion, so the dog would be frightened like, get that, turn that off, turn that off. But basically, he, as a God seeker, he would use this internet device, similar to Earth's, but kind of different, three-dimensional. And he explored all these different kinds of spiritual paths on the planet. There were these crystal elders who they were like, they would take these crystals and they call them holy transformers, and turn them on so that they would glow. And they would try to use this to amplify themselves spiritually at a high vibration so they can soul project. But he couldn't really get into that because it didn't seem to address what he wanted, the spirit, like something was missing. And then he looked at his parents' religion. This was when he was like really young. 400 is like 11 years old. 400 is not young. But and then he looked at his parents' religion, and they were like very traditional. Like they had these almost like Bibles, like Earth's Bibles, except they were similar. The closest thing to it would be like Kindles. They were like these futuristic discs that they could look at, and instead of having like this enormous Bible, they could look at it that way. But they were very traditional, and it was mostly focused on morals, like learning morals. But he realized that it was uplifting, but that it didn't feel like it brought him any closer to God. And he also felt it was like a little stiff, and but it was very ancient, very very ancient. And then he went to this other group because he was searching, he kept searching, where they had this thing called the Great Book. And it was like this enormous book. When you have thousands of years, thousands and thousands and thousands of years to write, it's this enormous book. And these people, they would have these entities, and they would communicate with entities, and they would transcribe like thousands and thousands and thousands of planes and dimensions and worlds and universes with many different beings. But he realized that that didn't lead anywhere either. It was just sort of went on and on and on in the astral level, the astral plane. And then finally he got to this other group where it was like a nature spirit path, and he would communicate, the different people would practice, the nature spirit elders would practice communicating with the spirit of trees and the spirit of air and the great spirit, and they gave love to the planet, which was beautiful and divine. But he said something like, I realized that I couldn't make the planet into my God. And he realized later that his spiritual test was, he was also with this woman, and he realized that part of the test that God gave him at that time was that he could have stayed there and been together with her, but had he done that, he might not have been shown his next level, his next step, which was he wanted to find God. And so it was sort of like a test. And so he said to her, he would talk to her, and she said to him, the problem is not the path, the problem is you. And she like, and so he, it was kind of rough, but he, then after that, he finally found the way of the eternal, which was my path in that lifetime. He found me, I was a teacher of the way of the eternal. And I forgot there was another group. There was another group he went to, which was like this bungee group where they would like bungee like off of a cliff to try to get out of their bodies, which is really weird. But anyway, finally he met me, and he just asked a question like, how do I move towards God? Like, what is the secret or the key? Do I have to use like go out in nature and use equipment and jump off a cliff, just like do all this stuff? And I believe I said something like, you don't have to do all that. You don't have to like jump from cliffs or put big crystal helmets on your head or all this stuff. Really, it's just a matter of having your own personal experience by learning soul projection. And so he began to secretly study, he didn't tell his parents, the way of the eternal. And it was interesting because at that point my husband transcribed some of the lectures, the spiritual lectures, which were very beautiful and uplifting. But it was interesting because over time he made a lot of spiritual breakthroughs and reached his 8th initiation, which is a level, corresponds with a level of heaven in the pure positive God worlds. So it was a great blessing to see a lot of it.
Absolutely, I can imagine. And what I find remarkable is that both you and your husband were able to, come back to this purpose, and you served the same kind of path in both that life and in this life. Do you feel like you've always almost had the same type of purpose that you had to uncover in every lifetime?
Yes, actually, I've in looking at different past lives, I've noticed that either he and I, we've had many lives studying with these ancient ones, like with these very ancient spiritual elders in the way of the eternal or in Vardankar. In that lifetime, I studied with who is my teacher, my mentor, and my guide. His name was Naitomo, and he was the living Vardan master on Ceres before I did. and he was oh God, he was amazing. He was 14,000 years old, which is, they don't live till 14,000 on Sirius, so it's unusual. He was 14,000 years old and very deeply perceptive. Like he had this very advanced power of prophecy and reading the soul records or the Bard Vidya, the Akashic records. Very wise. But I've known, like, if when we looked at our past lives, we've seen that we've worked with these masters, these ancient spiritual adepts, or elders, spiritual elders, for many lifetimes. I recall, and some of them didn't, like for instance, Plato. I studied in a past life, I was a student of Plato. And he taught this, but he taught it secretly. And also Pythagoras taught it secretly. Milarepa taught it. Zadok, who was an Essene, and in Jesus's childhood, he was a part of his life, as well as other different beings throughout history, and it's been interesting studying with them, because for one, they're so spiritually wise, and they have this very ancient wisdom and awareness. And also, it's sort of like, I guess in a way, it's sort of like if someone is a gymnast and they love gymnastics and they're working with like a world Olympic coach, it's exciting. It's really exciting because that person can sort of like show them the steps to living their dream. And so for me, working with those different masters felt like a great gift. So on Sirius, when I started to work with Naitomo, it was about at the age similar to Denami. It was about the age 400 and something, which is about 11 years old, Earthwise child. And it was wonderful because he worked with us one-on-one. I know this is weird, but he didn't have many students. He only had 6 students. On a planet with millions of people, he only had 6 students, which is like, what? But he would work. He was very, very selective, because one of the things that he said was basically that if somebody didn't have the spiritual development or the knowingness to realize what a profound gift it was, and instead they were focused on doubt, doubting him, doubting the path. Instead they were focused on, mental opinions or realities. If someone didn't have the maturity, the level of spiritual maturity, like ripe like a fruit, then he didn't want to work with them. And so knowingness is important, like to trust yourself as soul, that you just know because it just comes to you. And so he would sit down right in front of me, 2 chairs facing each other, and we would sit. And in his little hut with the light shining through the window, and I'd close my eyes, we'd close our eyes, and then he would go with me right out of body, and we would go to these different temples, these palaces of light in heavens, like these temples of golden wisdom, such as on the astral plane, which this is a plane of near-death experience, the heavens of near-death experience, or ETs, ghosts, or we'd go to the causal plane, which is the Akashic records, and go to the temple of wisdom there, or the mental plane. But my favorite, what I loved the most, was those are all the lower worlds of MEST, M-E-S-T, matter, energy, space, and time. But I especially love to project with him to these pure positive God worlds, which are heavens of just pure spirit and no matter. Like no matter, no time, no space. It gives the illusion of that in the lower layers of heaven, but in the pure positive God worlds, it's actually like beyond that. It's like graduating to the heaven of self-realization and God realization. And so he'd bring me there, and he would it's sort of like show me different experiences and different wisdom. And it was beautiful. It was basically returning to God, dwelling in the ocean of love and mercy, which is the home of God. And having certain realizations, certain breakthroughs, certain milestones spiritually, because there are many different spiritual paths that lead to God, and in a way, it's sort of symbolically like different grade levels of school. It's not that the second grade teacher is angry at the third grade teacher. It's like they're all sort of working together, and they all love each other, and symbolically, and this is the way I've always seen it, it's sort of like it gives the illusion that some people are further ahead and some people are further behind, but in actuality we're all in the same wave, because time doesn't really exist and we're already there. We're just realizing what we already are. But it was a joy to work with my Tomo. He was like, I mean, the closest symbolism I could think of would be something like the space opera Star Wars with Lucas, where you have this master and then he's apprenticing someone to become a master themselves. I mean, it's similar to that, but it's not about politics or space. It's about spirituality, purely spirituality. So that's the closest analogy I can think of it. But,
Wow. Wow, it's amazing. And whenever I talk to you, I think it's so fascinating that you're able to have these experiences. And I think most of all, being able to learn through them and use it to further your knowledge and to share everything that you've learned. Now, I want to thank you for spending this time with us and for sharing some of your experiences and your wisdom with us. For anybody that has listened to this message and wants to connect with you or wants to find out more about how they can die daily, where can they find you?
well, we have a website. It's www.vardankar.com. V as in Victor, A, R as in Robert, DANKAR.com. We also have a YouTube channel and a BitChute channel, and our patron channel. There are different ways on our membership page. There is if people want to actually study the secret teachings, they can sign up there, or they can do it through the patron page. We have like videos, like I'm reading actually Secrets of Seriesir on our patron page. But yeah, those are some of the ways they can find us through vardankar.com or our YouTube channel.